London, in the present day. Deep beneath the city's surface, within a climate-controlled vault of the British Library, an event is unfolding that will forever alter our perception of history. Here, there is no dust, no scent of aging paper, only the sterile hum of powerful servers and the chill of preservation. At the room's center, beneath reinforced glass, lies the Arundel Codex. It is not merely a book, but a maelstrom of thought, frozen onto 283 pages 5 centuries ago. The notes of Leonardo da Vinci. For generations, scholars have peered at this mirror script through magnifying glasses and microscopes, believing they had deciphered every word, understood every line. They were blind to what lay hidden. Now, a new kind of investigator has entered the vault. It has no eyes, yet it sees in spectra invisible to humans. It feels no fatigue, capable of analyzing millions of patterns per second. An artificial intelligence. A new generation neural network trained on thousands of Renaissance manuscripts begins its work. Scanners bathe the fragile leaves in waves of multispectral light. Ultraviolet, infrared, X-ray. Layer by layer, micron by micron, the machine digitally peels away the grime of centuries, the accidental ink stains, and, most importantly, the deliberate corrections of the author himself. And then, on the monitors, something extraordinary begins to emerge. Beneath the familiar text, beneath the celebrated diagrams of machines, a ghostly layer reveals itself. A palimpsest of thought. Notes that Leonardo had erased. Designs he had struck from the record. Ideas he feared to commit fully to the page. What the algorithm deciphered forced historians to reconsider their narratives and compelled engineers to rewrite the very textbooks of mechanics. This was not the diary of an artist. It was the logbook of a traveler in time, stranded in an age that could not comprehend him. The first shockwave emanated from a section Leonardo considered his life's work: anatomy. We know he dissected human corpses, an act performed illegally by candlelight in the damp cellars of Florence's Santa Maria Nuova hospital, fighting nausea and the ever-present fear of the Inquisition. But as the AI cross-referenced these sketches with modern MRI and CT scans, it exposed a detail overlooked for 500 years. Leonardo was not just drawing organs, he was modeling their function. On the margins of a page dedicated to the heart, a previously erased sketch was restored. It was an image of the aortic valve, but it was not a static depiction. It depicted the vortex of blood swirling through the chamber, a fluid dynamic principle that would not be scientifically proven until the late 20th century. Here was the chronicle of a solitary mind that had outpaced its era not by years, but by centuries. A mind that peered into an abyss of knowledge and perhaps was frightened by the reflection it saw. We are only now opening the files he chose to lock away, discovering that the greatest mysteries are not hidden in the cosmos, but in the suppressed footnotes of a single, brilliant, and profoundly isolated human mind. In the delicate cross-hatching of his notebooks, Leonardo da Vinci rendered the flow of blood through the aortic valve. He drew ghostly eddies, elegant vortices of fluid that formed as the valve's leaflets slammed shut. For centuries, cardiologists and historians dismissed these details as an artistic flourish, a concession.
Welcome to my channel. If you're fascinated by hidden truths, lost civilizations, and unsolved mysteries, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what you're about to see will change everything.
To the aesthetics of the Renaissance, a beautiful but fanciful embellishment. They were wrong. Recently, a hydrodynamic simulation run on a supercomputer using Leonardo's own 15th century diagrams as its blueprint revealed a staggering truth. He was absolutely, precisely correct. These vortices, which modern science would not formally identify and describe until the 20th century, are not decorative. They are essential. They create a gentle, stabilizing pressure that allows the valve leaflets to close smoothly and completely, preventing the violent backflow of blood. He had understood the intricate hydrodynamics of the human motor, not through dissection alone, but by observing the patient flow of water in a river and transposing those universal laws onto the river of life coursing through our veins. But a far more profound discovery lay waiting in the margins of his work, hidden in plain sight. A neural network tasked with deciphering the microscopic, near-invisible notes he etched with a silver point stylus unearthed his true, terrifying ambition. Leonardo was not merely studying anatomy for the sake of art. He was thinking as a bioengineer. He was attempting to design and build an artificial heart. His diagrams were not just observations, they were schematics for a prosthetic aortic valve. The notes, once decoded, become a chronicle of profound frustration, the lament of a mind 500 years ahead of its time. The text breaks off with a phrase steeped in bitterness. I perceive the mechanism of life. I understand its geometry, but I possess no material with which to recreate it. He had considered the elements of his world and found them all wanting. Glass, he wrote, was too fragile. Its shards would sever the flesh. Gold was too heavy. Its mass would burden the very organ it was meant to save. Leather, the most pliable of materials, simply rotted in the warm, wet environment of the body. He concluded, I am locked in a world of crude things. He understood the principles of life's pump, but was imprisoned by the technology of his age. It is the tragedy of an engineer who grasps the design of a jet engine, but has only wood, copper, and canvas at his disposal. His quest drove him deeper, from the body's engine to its command center. In the year 1489, Leonardo acquired a human skull and meticulously sawed it in half. He was searching for what the ancients called the sensus communis, the common sense, a physical location within the brain where all sensory input converged, the very seat of the soul. While tradition placed the soul in the heart, Leonardo, the ultimate pragmatist, hunted for it in the labyrinth of the mind. In a revolutionary act of anatomical inquiry, he took the brain of an ox and injected its ventricles with molten wax. As it cooled, it formed a perfect three-dimensional cast of these hidden chambers, the first time such an injection technique had ever been used. But what was he truly searching for? A hidden layer of text speaks of a visual pyramid, revealing an obsession with the mechanics of sight. Leonardo held a belief, common for his time, that the eye did not just passively receive light, but actively emitted a kind of perceptual force. Yet a forensic analysis of his optical diagrams shows he was on the verge of a monumental breakthrough. He had mapped the principles of the camera obscura and was inches away from understanding the function of the retina. But here he stopped.
Stay with me, because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time. and only a few people know the truth behind it.
He was halted by the theological dogma of his era. He had found the mechanism of vision, and in doing so, he feared he had found proof that the human being was a biological machine. Frightened by the philosophical implications, by the idea of unseating the soul in favor of mechanics, he erased his most audacious conclusions. He retreated, leaving behind only the neutral, beautiful sketches of bone and tissue. Water was his obsession. It flows through every folio, a constant theme in the chaos of his notes. But artificial intelligence has now found the system within that chaos. Da Vinci was developing a grand, unified theory, treating the concept of macrocosm and microcosm not as a philosophical metaphor, but as a literal, geological model. To him, the Earth was a living organism. Its rocks were its skeleton, its soil, its flesh. The rivers were its veins, carrying life-giving water through the landscape. The tides of the ocean were its respiration, the slow, rhythmic breathing of a planetary being. A computer-aided analysis of his cartographic surveys of the Arno River Valley revealed a chilling detail. His most iconic work, the Vitruvian Man, is not merely a study of human proportion. It is a schematic, a Rosetta Stone for his entire cosmology, showing how the patterns of man, the microcosm, are repeated precisely in the geology of the Earth and the movements of the heavens. He saw the source code of reality, the repeating geometry that connects a swirling vortex in a heart valve to the spiral of a galaxy. He understood that the same laws that govern the branching of a river also govern the branching of the arteries in a human lung. This was his ultimate vision, a universe not of disparate parts, but of a single, interconnected, living system. He was a man who drew the future, only to find himself trapped in the pages of the past, a prisoner of a world not yet ready for the truths he had uncovered. In the quiet hum of a digital archive, a disembodied intelligence pores over one of history's most iconic images. It is not the perfect symmetry of the Vitruvian Man that holds its attention, but something far smaller, almost invisible. Microscopic punctures left by the tip of a compass 5 centuries ago dot the original parchment. They form a silent constellation, a pattern that does not align with the contours of the human figure. When these pinpricks are transposed onto a map of Renaissance Italy, a breathtaking secret is revealed. They correspond with flawless precision to the locations of key cities and the highest peaks of the Apennine Mountains. Leonardo had encrypted a map within the very blueprint of man. He was pursuing a grand, unifying theory, that the proportions of the human body, the microcosm, were a direct reflection of the proportions of the landscape, the macrocosm. Man and Earth were one. But his ambition was never confined to theory. It sought to reshape the world itself. While in the service of the formidable Cesare Borgia, and later the Florentine Republic, Leonardo proposed a monumental engineering project, the diversion of the Arno River away from the city of Pisa. Officially, the objective was strategic, a masterstroke of military engineering designed to sever the rival city's access to the sea and choke its water supply. But the true purpose, concealed within his labyrinthine calculations, on Pomanis he saw as the clogged veins of the region, draining the malarial swamps and fundamentally altering the local climate. He wanted to heal the land. Centuries later, artificial intelligence, using Leonardo's own intricate drawings as a blueprint, ran a simulation of his grand design. The program's verdict was catastrophic. Had the project been realized as Da Vinci conceived it, the result would not have been a revitalized landscape, but an ecological collapse of unimaginable scale. The fertile valley would have withered into a barren desert. The rerouted river, its power unleashed and untamed, would have become an uncontrollable torrent of mud and debris, a liquid battering ram erasing everything in its path. The genius had miscalculated the sheer scale of nature's forces. And it appears he knew it. Flipped through the pages of his notebooks, one finds entire sections violently crossed out, the work of a mind recoiling from its own conclusions. Tucked away in one diary is a chillingly prescient entry. "Water is the driver of nature," he wrote, "but it is also its gravedigger. One cannot change the course of blood without killing the patient." The project was abandoned, not for a lack of funds, as historians long believed, but from a profound fear of the consequences. In that moment of terrifying clarity, Leonardo da Vinci became perhaps the first human in recorded history to grasp the fragile, intricate principle of ecological equilibrium. This deep reverence for nature's systems was born from a lifetime of relentless observation. While traversing the mountains of Lombardy, he found fossilized seashells embedded in the rock of the highest peaks. His conclusion was simple, direct, and utterly heretical. It flew in the face of biblical doctrine. This land, he deduced, was once the floor of an ancient sea. The Great Flood was not a single instantaneous event, but a slow, grinding
If you think you've seen everything, wait. What comes next will turn everything upside down.
geological process unfolding over eons. 3 full centuries before geology would be established as a science, Leonardo was describing the cycles of tectonic uplift and erosion. He knew the Earth was immeasurably older than the Church proclaimed, and he kept this dangerous knowledge to himself, entrusting his heretical thoughts only to the silent custody of paper. We remember Leonardo as the artist, the painter of transcendent beauty, but his contemporaries knew him primarily as a military engineer. In a letter to the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, effectively a job application, he lists his formidable capabilities. "I can construct bridges," he boasted. "I know how to drain moats. I can make cannons, mortars, and light ordnance of a beautiful and useful design." Only at the very end of a long and terrifying list of martial skills does he add, almost as an afterthought, "Also, I can paint." War was his patron. It fed him and funded his art. This paradox is nowhere more evident than in his famous design for an armored fighting vehicle, a tank, centuries ahead of its time. The drawing reveals a low, turtle-shaped shell of wood, its armor sloped to deflect cannon fire, a principle that would only be rediscovered for the formidable T-34 tanks of the 20th century. It bristles with cannons around its full perimeter. Inside, a complex system of gears and levers was to be powered by 8 men. Yet any engineer who has ever attempted to build a model from this schematic has confronted a baffling, crippling absurdity. The gearing system is designed to fail. The front wheels are geared to rotate forward, while the rear wheels are geared to turn in reverse. The machine could not move. It would tear itself apart upon its first attempt at motion. For generations, this was dismissed as a rare mistake, a moment of distraction from a mind occupied with 1,000 other thoughts. Or perhaps, some speculated, it was a clever defense against plagiarism.
Welcome to my channel. If you're fascinated by hidden truths, lost civilizations, and unsolved mysteries, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what you're about to see...
A wise man would spot the flaw and correct it, while a fool would be unable to copy the design. But the truth may be far more profound. The flaw was not a mistake, it was a message. It was a deliberate act of sabotage from a man who had looked into the abyss of his own destructive potential and chosen to step back. The same mind that feared to unbalance a river valley could not bring itself to unleash a perfect, unstoppable engine of war upon the world. He provided the blueprint for destruction, but embedded within it a fatal moral checksum. It is the final, silent testament of a mind that understood the terrible price of its own power, and in the heart of his most lethal machine, chose to plant a seed of peace. Within the vast collection of the Codex Atlanticus, a digital intelligence, tasked with analyzing hundreds of military schematics from the mind of Leonardo da Vinci, uncovered a chilling and deliberate pattern. They were not mistakes, they were acts of sabotage. Embedded within every design for a weapon of mass destruction, there lay a secret. Whether it was the giant crossbow, a machine of terrifying scale, the rapid-fire organ gun, a precursor to mechanized warfare, or the steam-powered cannon known as the architronito, Leonardo had intentionally introduced a single critical flaw, almost invisible to the untrained eye. He would sell the concept, accept the commission and the payment from his powerful patrons, but he would ensure that the blueprint for mass destruction was itself broken. The weapons could never be built as drawn. Deciphered drafts of his personal letters reveal the man behind the machine. He referred to warfare as pazzia bestialissima, the most bestial madness. This was a man who lived as a vegetarian in an age of brutal excess, a man who frequented markets not to purchase food, but to buy caged birds, only to open their doors and set them free. And yet, this same soul was compelled by the powers of his time to design engines for the slaughter of human beings. This was his quiet rebellion, the subtle protest of a profound pacifist trapped in a world of wolves. When a virtual reconstruction of Da Vinci's famed armored tank was assembled, the deliberate flaws were corrected. The outcome is terrifying. Had the gears been rendered correctly, had the drive mechanism been drawn to function as he truly knew it could, the machine would have become an unstoppable monster for the infantry of the 16th century. It would have been an indomitable fortress on the battlefield, capable of altering the course of history, granting absolute and terrifying power to whoever possessed it. Leonardo may have saved a continent from a bloodbath, not with a treaty or a protest, but by simply and deliberately misplacing the teeth on a gear. But the same mind that designed broken weapons also crafted the most celebrated image in human history. Here, too, a secret lies waiting. An artificial intelligence scanned the canvas of the Gioconda, its gaze penetrating to the level of individual grains of pigment. The analysis of the famous sfumato technique, that signature ethereal haze, revealed a process of almost inhuman precision. Leonardo applied layers of semi-translucent oil and varnish, each layer a mere 1 to 2 micrometers thick. That is 40 times thinner than a single human hair. The cumulative thickness of all the layers that create the flesh of Mona Lisa's face is only 30 microns. He labored on this single panel for over a decade. He carried it with him on his travels, a constant companion on the journey from Italy to France. And yet, he never delivered it to the man who commissioned it. Why? The algorithm, analyzing the evolute expression of the mouth. This was not an artist's search for the perfect, beautiful smile. It was a cold, scientific experiment. Journals dated to 1508 contain his notes on the dissection of facial muscles. He meticulously peeled the skin from the faces of cadavers to understand precisely which fiber, which nerve, cooled the corner of a lip upward. But the ultimate discovery is not in anatomy, but in optics. A note, scribbled in a margin of his journal, provides the key. The eye does not see. The eye creates. 500 years before neurobiologists would give it a name, Leonardo understood the fundamental duality of human sight, the difference between central and peripheral vision. Our central vision, the fovea, is designed for detail, for sharp focus, but it is poor at discerning subtle shadows. Our peripheral vision, however, excels at detecting those very shadows and movements in the haze. Leonardo painted the smile not with clear
If you think you've seen everything, wait. What comes next will turn everything upside down.
lines, but with low-frequency shadows, a visual whisper. When you gaze directly upon her lips, your central vision takes over, ignoring the faint shadows, and the mouth appears neutral, even serious. But the moment your gaze shifts to her eyes or her hands, your peripheral vision captures those faint shadows in the corners of her mouth. Your brain receives this information and instantly interprets it, constructs it as a smile. She smiles only when you are not looking directly at her. The final classification of this work is not as art, but as technology. It is a psychoactive image, an engine designed to manipulate human perception. Leonardo da Vinci's greatest project was not a machine of war or a portrait of a woman. It was a lifelong investigation into the very mechanics of reality itself, proving that what we see is not always what is there, but what our mind is engineered to believe. He had deciphered the very code of human sight. It was a staggering demonstration of optics and anatomy, a scientific treatise encrypted not in a codex, but in the enigmatic smile of a Florentine merchant's wife. For Leonardo da Vinci, to see was to understand, and to understand was to unlock the machinery of God. But one machine, above all others, haunted his waking and sleeping hours, the machine of flight. For 5 centuries we have seen the sketches, the elegant bat-winged ornithopter, the aerial screw, a clear ancestor of the helicopter, the pyramidal parachute. We have viewed them as the romantic fantasies of a Renaissance dreamer. But this was a profound misreading. A forensic analysis of his Codex on the Flight of Birds reveals not poetry, but punishing engineering. When his chaotic, mirrored notes are fed through the logic of a neural network, the sketches reanimate, transforming from static ink into dynamic, physical models. Leonardo was the first to grasp a fundamental truth, one that would elude natural philosophers for generations, that the air itself was an ocean, a fluid medium with currents and eddies. He applied the laws of hydrodynamics to the atmosphere, realizing that a bird does not merely beat the air into submission, it corkscrews through it, a living vortex of bone and feather, generating lift through a complex twisting motion. But did the machine ever leave the page? Did man, guided by his hand, take to the sky? The official history is silent, yet legends persist, whispers of his apprentice, Zoroastro da Peretola, attempting a flight from the summit of Monte Ceccheri. For years it was merely a story, but in the faint, erased passages of his notebooks, modern analysis has found what appears to be confirmation. A hastily sketched trajectory of a fall, frantic calculations of wind load, and a single prophetic sentence. The great bird will take its first flight from the back of its great swan, filling the world with amazement and all writings with its fame. It was written as a prophecy, a declaration of triumph, but scribbled below this grand pronouncement in a smaller, tighter script are the cold, brutal mechanics of failure, calculations of impact force, the precise physics of a shattering bone. Simulations of the ornithopter in motion reveal the heartbreaking truth Leonardo himself discovered. The human machine was too weak. Our pectoral muscles, no matter how strong, could never generate the explosive power required to lift our own weight. He understood. And so, in his later years, he pivoted from powered, flapping flight to the silent elegance of the glide. He invented the delta wing. When his later designs for these wings are modeled, they prove to be aerodynamically stable. Had he constructed this glider from the simple materials available to him, bamboo and silk, it would have flown. But he had reached an impasse of power. In one note, his frustration burns through the centuries. "A force born of fire is needed," he writes, "not of flesh." 400 years before its invention, Leonardo da Vinci had foreseen the necessity of the internal combustion engine. He knew that the biological motor was a dead end for aviation. To understand the source of such vision, we must look not at the inventions, but at the architecture of the mind that conceived them. A psycholinguistic and stylometric analysis of his complete works, every note and doodle, paints a portrait of a man who, today, would be given a litany of diagnoses. First, an extreme form of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He almost never finished what he started. The portrait of a mind operating at an impossible velocity, leaping from subject to subject. A single page begins with a treatise on the play of light and shadow on a single leaf, veers into the intricate mechanics of a door lock, and concludes, without pause, with a simple shopping list. Second, his unique brain. His famous mirror writing was not a cipher designed to protect his work. It was a mark of efficiency. Analysis of the pen strokes reveals it was simply faster and more comfortable for him to write this way. His brain, it seems—
Wait, this is not the full story. The most important part
did not waste cognitive energy flipping letters to conform to social standards. The connections between his cerebral hemispheres were profoundly different from those of 99% of humanity, allowing him to see the world raw, unfiltered by the perceptual shortcuts most of us rely on to function. And this reveals the final, most poignant truth: a profound, inescapable loneliness. To possess a mind that moves at such a pace, that sees the world through a lens of such piercing clarity, is to be an exile in your own time. To understand the flight of a bird with the precision of an engineer, to capture a fleeting smile with the knowledge of an anatomist, to foresee a future of machines born of fire, this is to see what no one else can see. And to see what no one else can see is to walk through the world utterly, irrevocably alone. An analysis of the words themselves reveals a deep, black melancholy. He was a sun, orbited by devoted pupils and patrons, a mind that illuminated an age. But he was utterly, profoundly alone. Intellectually, he inhabited a world no one else could enter. There was simply no one to talk to. His ideas soaring into realms of mechanics
Wait, this is not the full story. The most important part is just beginning, and it changes everything we thought we knew.
anatomy and cosmology found no purchase in the minds around him. He was writing into the void. A single desperate question repeats through his private journals, a mantra of despair, whispered only to the page. Tell me, has anything of worth been done? This sense of monumental failure finds its most potent symbol in the heart of Florence, within the Palazzo Vecchio. Here, he was to create his masterpiece, the Battle of Anghiari. It was conceived as the greatest fresco of the Renaissance, a whirlwind of kinetic fury, of men and beasts locked in a primal struggle for survival. Today, it is considered lost. Legend, for centuries, has offered a romantic consolation. The story holds that Giorgio Vasari, tasked with redecorating the Great Hall decades later, could not bring himself to destroy the work of a genius. Instead, he is said to have constructed a false wall directly in front of Leonardo's fresco, preserving it for posterity. As a clue, he painted a tiny green flag in his own mural with two words inscribed: Cerca, trova. Seek, and you shall find. For decades, scientists, armed with this hope, have scanned these walls with ground-penetrating radar, finding intriguing voids, feeding the myth that a lost world lies just inches away. But a more tragic version of the story emerges not from legend, but from the cold, hard science of Leonardo's own chemical recipes. An analysis of his material notes from that period paints a picture of catastrophic hubris. Leonardo despised the unforgiving speed of traditional fresco, the art of painting on wet plaster. He wanted the slow, contemplative deliberation of oil on canvas, but on the scale of a monumental wall. He devised a new technique, an experimental blend of oil and wax-based pigments. The scale, however, was immense. The wall was vast. The paint, refusing to cure in the damp hall, began to weep. Streaks of color started to run, the fury of the battle dissolving into slurry. In a panic, Leonardo ordered enormous braziers to be brought in, their fires roaring to dry the wall. The heat baked the lower sections of the painting, but it had a disastrous effect on the top. The wax in the pigments melted. The masterpiece began to flow, the faces of warriors and the powerful forms of horses sagging, dripping, and collapsing into a grotesque, muddy cascade. A deciphered draft of a letter to the Florentine authorities is a testament to his pain. In it, he admits total technical defeat. "The wall," he wrote, "has rejected me." He even models the chemical decay of his own pigments, a scientist performing an autopsy on his own failed creation. The verdict is brutal. By the time Vasari arrived, there was no masterpiece to hide. There were only the ruins of a dream, a ghost of a painting staining the plaster. Vasari was not concealing a treasure. He was granting a merciful end to a ghost. The phrase "cerca trova" was perhaps not a clue, but a cruel irony, or a philosophical challenge to seek truth, not treasure, in the ruins of the past. In his final years, living in France at the Château du Clos Lucé, under the patronage of King Francis I, the master's body began to fail him. His right hand, the instrument of his gem of all things, A series of works known as the Deluge drawings became his last obsession. They are visions of pure cataclysm. Vortices of water annihilate cities. Mountains crumble into the abyss. The sky and sea become one churning, inescapable force. And in the chaos, human faces are twisted in the final, silent scream. For centuries, art historians viewed these as mystical, visionary works, the premonitions of a dying man contemplating a biblical apocalypse. But where they saw chaos, modern analysis has found a terrifying order. Artificial intelligence, examining the geometry of the whirlpools and the furious motion of the water, has seen not chaos, but mathematics. Leonardo was drawing fractals. He was depicting the physics of turbulence with the precision of a scientific formula. These were not fantasies of divine wrath. They were a forecast. He had watched, for a lifetime, as water grinds down stone, as rivers carve canyons, as the sea devours the shore. He applied his peerless mind to the slow, inexorable forces of geology and erosion, and he arrived at a conclusion that horrified him to his core. The process of destruction is irreversible. The earth itself is not eternal. Water, in the end, will defeat the land. His last deciphered notes are filled with this existential terror. He calculated that the Mediterranean would one day break through its straits, that storms would wash away the soil, that the planet itself would be worn down to a smooth, featureless sphere. Humanity, he concluded, was not destined for a last judgment with trumpeting angels and cleansing fire. Its fate was a slow, cold, and wet oblivion, an inexorable erasure by the patient, indifferent forces of nature itself. Water is the blood of the earth, but it is destined to become its shroud. In an age when the consumption of meat was a raw display of power and wealth, a declaration of one's station, Leonardo da Vinci was an anomaly. He was a strict vegetarian. This was not a private quirk, but a known conviction, confirmed in the letters of his contemporaries. He would consume nothing, they wrote, that possessed blood. A forensic analysis of his own life, hidden in the margins of his manuscripts, reveals the truth. His shopping lists are—
This is where things get really interesting. What you're about to hear might explain why this was never meant to be discovered.
a litany of the earth's bounty. Chickpeas, beans, an abundance of vegetables, wine, bread, and fruits. There is a stark and deliberate absence. No
Stay with me, because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time. And only a few people know the truth behind it.
meat, not a single entry. The deciphering of these marginal notes uncovers not a dietary preference, but a profound ethical stance. Man is indeed the king of beasts, he scrawled, for his brutality exceeds theirs. We live by the death of others. He saw humanity not as shepherds, but as walking sepulchres. These words, written over 500 years ago, resonate with the force of a modern manifesto. For Leonardo, the pain of a living creature was not an abstraction. It was a palpable reality. Witnesses describe him wandering the markets of Florence, purchasing caged birds not for his table or for study, but for the sole purpose of opening his hands and releasing them into the sky. This philosophy extended to his kitchen, which was a laboratory in its own right. He sought to create the ideal sustenance, a dish he called the soup of everything, a perfect concentrate of energy. He held a deep belief that the clarity of the mind was inextricably linked to the purity of one's diet. In his quest to understand the universe, he first sought to cleanse the very lens through which he viewed it, attempting to purify his brain through food, all to better see the absolute essence of things. On the 2nd of May, 1519, that extraordinary mind began to fade. A legend, immortalized in the grand painting by Ingres, tells us he died in the arms of a weeping King Francis I. It is a romantic, noble end for a titan of the Renaissance. But it is a fiction. An analysis of the royal journal and the court's correspondence reveals a simple, logistical truth. On that day, the king was at the Château de Saint-Germain-en-Laye, a journey of 2 full days from Amboise, where Leonardo lay dying. He did not pass in the embrace of a monarch. He was surrounded by those who truly knew him, his devoted pupils, Francesco Melzi and Salai, and a priest to hear his final confession. His last known words were recorded, written by a hand, possibly his left, as his right was paralyzed, that trembled with finality. "I have offended God and mankind," he wrote, "in that my work did not reach the quality it should have." We are tempted to dismiss this as the false modesty of a supreme genius. But to analyze the full context of his life is to understand this was no affectation. It was a sincere and bottomless cry of repentance. He left behind thousands upon thousands of pages, a blizzard of sketches, notes, and observations. Yet, not one single completed treatise was published in his lifetime. Not one finished theory was ever offered to the world. His knowledge of anatomy, of hydrodynamics, of optics was not merely advanced, it was revolutionary, anticipating the discoveries of science by centuries. But this knowledge remained imprisoned in ink, locked away in chests. The world did not receive it. In his final moments, he felt the crushing weight of a gift betrayed, a genius squandered on ephemeral courtly decorations and paintings he could never bring himself to finish. A closer examination of the page numbering within his codices reveals something even more terrifying. Somewhere between 40 and 50% of his written legacy is gone, vanished. What secrets were held on those missing pages? Extrapolating from the known vectors of his insatiable curiosity, historians can only build hypotheses. There might have been astronomy. Long before Copernicus or Galileo, Leonardo wrote a simple, world-shattering sentence: "The sun does not move." It is possible he had developed a complete heliocentric model of the cosmos, only to destroy it himself, fearing the wrath of the Church. There could have been pioneering experiments in polymer chemistry, as he sought to create artificial amber and indestructible varnishes. Perhaps, among the lost folios, were the first true schematics for a mechanical calculating machine, a primitive computer born centuries before its time. These pages have dissolved into the silence of history. Perhaps they were plundered by his heirs, torn apart and sold as souvenirs. Perhaps they were burned by Leonardo himself in a final, desperate act of despair. Or perhaps they were systematically destroyed by an institution that feared the light of his knowledge. The truth remains elusive, a ghost in the archive. The questions hang in the air, unanswered, as the past recedes, leaving behind only the echo of a mind that saw too much, too soon, and a silence that speaks to the greatest loss of all. The work is complete, Terabytes of data have been processed, and the digital ghost of a 500-year-old mind has been summoned. The question that has echoed through the centuries can now be addressed. Who, truly, was Leonardo? The analysis sketches a portrait not of a magician or a prophet, but of a man with a profound, almost alien mutation of perception. His mind, it appears, processed the river of visual information at a velocity far beyond the human norm. He could perceive the blur of a dragonfly's wing, not as a smear of motion, but as 77 distinct beats per second, and his hand could render it with unnerving accuracy. He saw the hidden architecture of the universe, the connections that bind the cosmos together, where others saw only chaos. He found the same universal algorithm in the branching fractal of a tree, mirrored in the veins of a human lung, and again in the deltas of a river carving its way to the sea. He saw the same divine spiral in the gentle curl of a human hair, as in the terrifying vortex of a whirlpool. He was a traveler in time, marooned centuries too early, a prisoner of his age of the chisel, the brush, and the goose-feather quill. The recent discovery of spectral layers within his journals, the faint, erased sketches of his doubts and corrections, does not diminish his legend. On the contrary, it makes his tragedy tangible. For the first time, we see the man behind the myth. We witness his hesitations, his errors, his fears. We see a human being attempting to embrace the entire universe with his intellect, only to be confronted with the crushing truth that the universe is infinite and a single life is heartbreakingly brief. The Codex Arundel and his other manuscripts are not mere relics of history. They are the first drafts of our present. Surgical robots, automated drones, contact lenses, armored tanks and submersible vessels. All of this was born, fully formed, in the mind of one man, 500 years before its time. Leonardo da Vinci left us a message, a code we have only now, with the creation of an intellect that can approach his own, begun to decipher. And that message is simple, yet profound. Everything is connected to everything else. Learn to see. His story, it seems, is not over. It is only now truly beginning. As our own artificial intelligences learn from his methods, they will uncover the equation that finally carries us to the stars. Or perhaps they will find a warning, a pattern he saw in the inevitable arc of progress and decay that we, in our own time, will once again fail to comprehend. The greatest minds leave behind not answers, but questions that echo through eternity, compelling us to look closer and to understand that the surface of things is never the whole truth.
If you think you've seen everything, wait. What comes next will turn everything upside down.